All right, I want to check out this video titled Why Being Single is So Expensive in the US by CNBC Make It. I think it's going to bring up some good points.
Nearly half of all US adults are single today. That number has been steadily rising for several decades. Nearly 70% of men and about 65% of women were married in 1960. Today, it's just over 50% of men and around 50% of women who are married.
That's true, and I'm not denying that, but I also think a lot of people are deciding to engage in partnerships and not necessarily get married. So that's another thing to look at as well. People still might be cohabitating, sharing expenses, but they just haven't necessarily gotten married yet. So just something to think about.
They're not single
That's
for
crazy.
the usual reasons that you hear. Oh, there's not enough marriageable men for women or any of those kinds of reasons. But instead, that they find single life fulfilling.
Yeah, I mean, I think priorities have just shifted. I think people are focused on, building their lives first, getting more established in their careers, spending time with their friends and family, dating longer. None of those are bad things as long as their priorities are straight. I don't think it's bad that people are waiting and dating around more and, taking a little bit longer with that decision.
As someone single living in a major city like New York, it's definitely very stressful when it comes to personal finances. You have the full burden.
New York is just expensive.
So I would say the majority of my friends who are single and live alone, they're very stressed about the cost of living.
Yeah, but New York is like so expensive. I'm married, we have dual incomes, and even with that, we could manage living in New York, but it would be pricey. I don't know if I'd want to pay that much. But yeah, I can't even imagine on one income.
So what's causing so much financial anxiety among single Americans? Singles tax is a newly coined term referring to the financial burdens that are uniquely incurred by single people.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely economies of scale. So whenever there's a household, there's always fixed expenses that go into living in that house. It doesn't matter if one person lives in it. It doesn't matter if two people live in it. Rent is one of those, utilities. There's a lot of things that are fixed. So if you have two people making money, it definitely helps ease that burden. So I think that's a real thing for sure.
If you're single and living alone, you don't get the economies of scale. So instead of having a partner to split expenses with, you cover everything yourself.
Take a look at South Carolina, which ranks right in the middle among all states in terms of cost of living. MIT calculates that the typical expenses for two working adults with no children total around $47,483 a year. By contrast, a single adult with no children has estimated expenses of $29,880 annually.
I mean, there's a difference, but it's not like the person who's single is paying double in expenses per person. Like I said, there's definitely an uplift on some things that you're covering yourself, but some things are just more expensive when you have two people, like groceries, you both have phone bills, you both have medical expenses. So that's actually not as big of a gap as I would think.
I have to cover all of my living expenses, medical
This guy lives
costs,
in New York, so
travel expenses,
that's valid. I don't know how he does that.
etc. Like everything is on you.
Break down the typical expense even further, and you can see that nearly every type of expenses, apart from medical, is cheaper per person for couples who have the luxury of splitting the check.
Yeah, for sure. And for example, like transportation, me and my wife share a car right now, which isn't ideal, but I work from home. We save a lot of money doing it. I'm sure we'll get another car eventually, but you have more opportunities to find areas to save money for sure.
A 2023 analysis by Zillow revealed that renters pay a singles tax of nearly $7,000 a year.
That's a direct
for
economy of
alone.
scale.
And in major cities like New York City, that number can be as high as $19,500 a year.
My largest expense is actually my housing. So my rent takes up the majority of my expenses.
I mean, in New York, that makes sense.
The obvious reasons that housing is a bigger share of single people's expenses is simply that there's one person living per housing unit versus two or more people living per housing unit. But I think it goes beyond that. Single people may be more likely to live in expensive cities like New York or San Francisco, where we have housing crises.
There might be more people in big cities, but I think there's single people everywhere. I just think they see a bigger burden in those big cities because it's so expensive. But I know this isn't fun. I know I might get some backlash for this. The obvious solution to that is having roommates. If I wasn't married, I would definitely have roommates right now. Again, I get the appeal of having your own place. If you can afford it, that's great. But if you want to save on your housing expenses, roommates
Is especially acute for single people in urban areas.
The cost of living in New York City has definitely made me and my friends reconsider why we do live here and what we're actually investing in.
He's talking about investing in living in New York. Actually, that's a pretty good point because New York has a lot of people, a lot of connections. So if you're taking advantage of that, there is something to be said about making connections in New York, building your career, networking. But if you're not taking advantage of that, then the price does seem pretty steep for me.
It's really hard to control your housing expense, and it's really hard to control your food expense because they are necessities. Things like clothing, entertainment, they have more variability, but these fixed expenses really do contribute to that singles tax. And unfortunately, that's where inflation is hitting the hardest right now.
Definitely this year, especially the cost of everything.
Especially in housing.
Food, travel, gas for your car, like everything.
Yeah, even more than like food or gas or like some of those variable expenses. Housing in regards to inflation is one of the highest impacted areas. We've seen housing prices skyrocket. We've seen interest rates skyrocket. And I know they're mostly talking about rent in this video, but those do impact rents as well. So we have seen those go up quite a bit.
But it's not just expenses that are stacked against single people.
Financial advantages for married couples are written right into the laws of the land.
The most prominent example is the income tax.
It used to be that tax brackets were structured in such a way that if two people were earning money and then they combined their incomes, they would actually pay more taxes after they were married.
This marriage tax penalty was largely eliminated for all but certain states and high-income earners.
There's really no longer a marriage penalty. The standard deduction is basically double the single deduction.
Yeah, I feel like the reason behind that is because traditionally, right, a lot of times there's one breadwinner in the family, one person who's bringing home at least a majority of the income. So because they're supporting multiple people in their household financially, they would get a tax break because of that. But yeah, it doesn't take into account if there's two earners in the household. I'm married, so I'm not complaining about the tax break, but it is interesting to think about.
A 2023 survey revealed that 74% of singles disliked paying more taxes than married couples. And 79% said they'd like to see the government offer more tax breaks for single people.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. I don't think we should penalize married people, but I'm all for tax breaks and for people utilizing whatever legal tax breaks they can.
Social Security is another policy that favors those who are married.
You're able to, at times, take your spouse's Social Security benefit if it's higher than yours.
But again, that makes sense because let's say that there's a couple where one person is bringing home majority of the money in the household and one parent decided to stay at home with the children. And let's say they did that for 30 years. And hypothetically, let's say, unfortunately, they get divorced. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But for this example, let's just say it does. That spouse who is staying home with the kids should not be penalized just because they weren't directly bringing home the income. They were still contributing to the household. They were still part of that marriage that was forming that income. So that makes sense to me. I don't think that that's something that should be targeted. And in their defense, they're not targeting married people. They're just saying that married people have these advantages and we should have more advantages for single people. So.
Time you earned $50,000 a year on average. Your spouse earned $150,000 a year. When your spouse passes away and you're married, or you're married for at least 10 years, you now have the option of taking that higher Social Security benefit.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. You're one household, you're one married couple. You shouldn't be penalized in retirement after your spouse passes away just because they were the ones who earned the money. You were one family unit. So that makes sense to me. That's not a bad thing.
All of these factors, along with the luxury of splitting the bill, makes it significantly easier for married Americans to both save and grow their assets. A 2019 study by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis found that married young adults have greater median net worth and home ownership rates compared to single households. Between 1989 and 2016, a typical household with a married couple had 3 times the amount of net worth compared to households that were partnered or single.
I mean, unfortunately, it's really just math. If you're sharing expenses and lowering it, and you also have dual income, you're just going to have more money. You're going to have more disposable income to put towards investments, to put towards purchasing a house. So it's definitely an advantage, right? To have 2 incomes contributing to the same household for sure.
I do think it's easier for couples to build assets. And there's one caveat I'm going to share there is that you both have a shared vision of what your goals are.
Yeah, I agree
and you
with that.
both have discipline.
That's great.
But being single also comes with its unique set of benefits.
This idea of being single is extremely empowering to people, which is why they're willing to pay more to do it.
Financial freedom that comes from being single is really awesome because I get to spend all my money on me.
Yeah, there's a lot of financial benefits for being in a relationship or being married. There's tax breaks, you have dual incomes, you're sharing expenses, but it's not the reason you should be in a relationship or you should be married. If you like being single, you have a lot of freedom and opportunity for you as well. You can use that free time to grind, to pursue your dreams, to build your career. So yeah, there might not be as many set in stone financial benefits, but there are benefits to it. And you don't want to rush into a relationship too fast.
There are several things that single Americans can do themselves to navigate around the singles tax.
It's even more important for you to budget. Understand how much money you're making, how much money you're spending, where is your money going. You probably have a lot of fixed costs that you need to be aware of.
I 100% agree with that. You got to take ownership over your budget and your financial habits. And yeah, you might have some added expenses for being single, but ultimately it's in your control. So that's great advice. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. Do you think the single tax is real? What's your advice for people who are single and are struggling to pay for their living expenses while living alone? If you like this video, make sure you hit that like button. And if you like this type of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be in the loop on future videos. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.